Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 30th of January 2018. So coming to the first article, walking with others on a tight rope. The opinion is that Gandhi knew well that one cannot be a friend of truth without living on the edge. Now this editorial is context in regards to the martyrdom day of Gandhiji, which is the 30th of January. So this article is a memory of Gandhiji and an analysis of the Gandhian thought. Now the Gandhian thought as such for UPSC has immense importance. You can reproduce the Gandhian ideas in your essay paper. You can reproduce his ideas in your social issues aspects. Also, it has scope of analysis in economics and polity aspect. So definitely Gandhian thought is of utmost relevance, and in ethics the role of Gandhian thought is indispensable. So the article has immense value. It has immense utility for different papers of UPSC. So that is the importance of the editorial. Now coming to the key ideas which have been discussed. The first idea is with regards to the omnipresence of Gandhiji. Now you need to know that Gandhiji is a very prominent figure in India and continues to be so. At least physically he has a lot of presence. For example, there are a lot of statues in the name of Gandhiji. You see Gandhiji's pictures in several offices. You often see certain streets named after him. Even on the currency he has a spot. So definitely there is an omnipresence of Gandhiji, despite the fact that it is 70 years since his martyrdom day. So Gandhiji continues to survive, at least physically, in this country. That is one idea. Now the next idea is stemming from the first idea itself, which is about the spirit of Gandhiji. Now here the author has analyzed that the spirit of Gandhiji is lost in India. Despite the fact that Gandhiji is so omnipresent and existing physically, the entire spirit of his thought and his ideas is something that the citizens in this country are not advocating, and they are not using it. This is most starkly visible if one sees the daily day-to-day debates of the politicians and also the debates in the press and all of that. If you will see, then the Gandhian spirit is something that seems to have been lost. So that is one analysis that has been given here. The third issue is with regards to the present generation's opinion on Gandhiji. Now here you need to understand that the biggest gap in understanding Gandhian thought is with regards to the present generation. Now the past generation, the generation before this modern generation, still had a close affinity towards Gandhiji because they had heard from their seniors about the freedom struggle, and they had some kinship, they had some clearer understanding of the Gandhian philosophy. But for the present generation, the knowledge about Gandhiji is largely through his physical presence. For example, his ideas are really a part of the syllabus of students, but an actual understanding of his thought is something that is missing. Often the present generation considers Gandhiji's ideas as very austere, and he followed a very simple living. And this is the age of social media, and this is the age of selfie culture. So in such a scenario, this gap between the simplicity of Gandhiji and the hype of the present generation is a widening gap between the two. So that is what has been analyzed here. Another thing is with regards to the global recognition. Now here the editorial analyzes that how the Gandhian thought has received so much of global recognition and accolades. You should know that even when President Obama visited India, he quoted Gandhiji. So Gandhian idea is something that is very relevant globally. Various spiritual leaders, various civil rights leaders have used Gandhian philosophy. For example, Martin Luther King Jr., he used it. The spiritual leader of Tibet, that is Mr. Dalai Lama, he used it. Also modern leaders like Aung San Suu Kyi, she has a number of times acknowledged the Gandhian philosophy. Also young militants in Serbia, the freedom fighters of Tahrir Square in Egypt, all of them have time and again referred to the Gandhian philosophy. So this shows that the global recognition is very high, and somehow it's a paradox that global leaders are using the Gandhian philosophy much more than the Indian politicians. The Indian politicians are only using Gandhi's name for rhetoric. They are only using it for a means to gain some brownie points, but the spirit of Gandhian thought is something that they are not applying. So that is something that has been drawn in this analysis. Another thing is with regards to Gandhi as a political philosopher. Now here again you need to understand that Gandhiji is not largely acknowledged as a political philosopher. Why is it so? Because Gandhian philosophy was largely called by politicians as an utopian philosophy. Even Jawaharlal Nehru said that Gandhian philosophy is not very apt for politics, and Gandhiji himself never played a political role. You should know that even after independence, Gandhiji did not take up any political role, and for a long time before that also in the Indian National Congress, the Gandhiji was not a very active participant there. So his philosophy in politics is something that is not acknowledged much. But this is changing recently, and a lot of political philosophers, a lot of political students are now focusing on Gandhian philosophy from the political perspective. So this is something that is important, that Gandhian thought in the politics sphere is something that is on a rise. So that is one analysis. Another thing about the Gandhian thought is a comparison of the rights versus duty. Now this is something important from the ethics paper point of view, and also from polity perspective. Now you need to know that largely people are focusing on rights. Rights are given a forefront as compared to duty. This you can also see on a global scale, where countries are asking for their rights on global fora. For example, in the WTO, even India said that India wants its rights before its duties towards this institution. This is also seen in global fora like the UN. However, Gandhiji was one rare philosopher, one rare thinker who had advocated the importance of duty before right. So this is something that is unique to Gandhian thought. And if there is an opportunity in your paper where you have to justify that why duty is supreme to rights, you can use the Gandhian thought. So that is the importance here. Next is Gandhiji's idea of ethics of empathy. Now you need to understand that empathy is a key idea that Gandhiji has advocated. He had said that this is the core of non-violence, and as a result of which this idea of empathy is incomplete. Any discussion on empathy is incomplete without a reference to Gandhiji. So empathy being a part of again your ethics paper, a mention of Gandhiji in this regard is indeed something that I would suggest you people should do. So here Gandhiji says that empathy, for ensuring complete empathy, or for that matter any form of ethics, what is required is that a person should first look within oneself, then change oneself, and then he should aim at changing the world. So this is the key idea of Gandhiji, that his ethics is largely about a fundamental change. His ethics is not about an external analysis of the situation, rather an internal check on one's own self. So he says that for any change to be realized, a change in the individual is what is required. So this is the key idea emphasized by Gandhiji, and this is an idea that you can suggest for your ethics paper. For example, even recently we discussed an article that India has performed very poorly on its environmental protection index. Now this idea of Gandhiji's self-introspection is something that needs to be advocated here. See, if India is not going to focus on itself, if India is not going to improve its own environmental credentials, then how can India claim and ask the foreign countries to reduce their emissions? So India talks loud on the climate change agreements in Paris, but its own doings are something that India is not introspecting. So a fundamental change needs to arise from the country within. So this is how you need to link the Gandhian thought to practical things and use them as an example in your answers. This is what is required in the UPSC papers. Also, one thing I would like to suggest here is that whenever you are using the Gandhian thought, or for that matter any such kind of a philosopher's thought, you need to make it very realistic. You should avoid making the answer very artificial. So if you will apply the thought to a practical situation, that or a current affair situation, in such a scenario, that element of reality will come into your answers, and this is something that UPSC will appreciate. So that is one analysis here. Another thing is with regards to the globalization debate. Now this is the most important analysis of this editorial, that how Gandhian thought is very much relevant in the globalization debate which is going on, because countries are going anti-globalization. They are adopting a lot of protectionist measures. So this is a international phenomenon, and here Gandhian thought is of much relevance? Because Gandhiji said that cultures and nations are not isolated identities and they have a key role in making the entire human history. So he suggested that there is a need for a harmonic exchange and transformative dialogue amongst cultures. Also, he called for cooperation in terms of mutual understanding. He called for empathetic friendship in countries. He called for non-violent partnerships. So this is something that is of utmost relevance today when countries are losing faith in the idea of harmonizing. So that is one analysis which has been drawn. Also, Gandhiji had given a very popular quote where Gandhiji had said that he would welcome winds of all culture blowing around his house freely, but he would refuse to get blown away off his feet by any of these winds. So this is a quote, this is an idea that you can quote whenever you are justifying that globalization is required, wherever you are drawing a case for globalization vis-a-vis anti-globalization movements. So in that regard, this idea is of utmost relevance. So this is the key idea in the editorial also. Now, coming to the next idea is that of religion and ethics. Now, first and foremost, this is important from the ethics paper. You need to understand that ethics is not religion. Some things can be advocated in the religions, but it might not be ethical. So definitely there is a difference. But for Gandhiji brought about a lot of alignment between religion and ethics. Definitely ethics has evolved after religion. Religion has preceded ethics. So ethics has a huge amount of takings from the religion. Ethics is not something that is completely isolated from religion. Rather, a relationship of some commonalities is there between ethics and religion. So that is something that is important, and this was one of the first few people to recognize this commonality has been Gandhiji himself, who has said that all religions, for that matter even Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, all these religions Gandhiji had studied, and he had said that the core values of all the religions are largely same and they all advocate same moral behavior. So that is one analysis which has been highlighted in this editorial. Another thing is with regards to democracy. Now Gandhiji had some unique ideas of democracy which were similar to his ideas of as I mentioned in the globalization debate also, these ideas are similar at a country level also. He called for a pluralistic and intercultural recognition, and he said that this is the key for democracy. Until and unless a culture is acceptably plural and people are respecting the otherness of the others, until that situation is realized, a democracy is going to be a farce. So that spirit of democracy is something that Gandhiji has advocated long before. So that is one idea you can use. Another thing is a unique idea of freedom is what Gandhiji suggested. Largely, freedom is viewed from the point of view of my own rights and my own personal space. However, Gandhiji advocated an entirely new idea of freedom, and when he said that freedom is about recognizing the otherness of the other. Also, Gandhiji said that for freedom to be completely realized, what is required is a dialogue. He said that he would prefer walking with others even on a tightrope rather than walking on a rigid, inflexible and impenetrable ground, and this in the true sense will be freedom for a person. So this is something that Gandhiji has given an idea on, a unique idea on freedom. So that is again a relevant analysis. So the final opinion of this editorial is that Gandhiji's legacy lives even after 70 years of his martyrdom, and it is much needed today than ever in the past. So that is one analysis with regards to the Gandhian thought. The editorial, as I mentioned before also, is of utmost relevance and has immense utility. So coming to the next article, cautious optimism and pixelating the Indian profile. Now I have clubbed two articles because both these articles are in the context of the Economic Survey 2018, which has been released. Now coming to some background, you need to know these are some PT point of views, some PT facts, that the economic survey is prepared by the Department of Economic Affairs, and this department is under the Finance Ministry itself. It is largely prepared by the Chief Economic Advisor, and this article here is by the Chief Economic Advisor, that is Mr. Arvind Subramaniam. Another thing is that once the economic survey is prepared, it is laid in the Parliament by the Finance Minister, and it is laid in both the houses of the Parliament. So that is some background fact. These questions can come sometimes directly. Now coming to the key points of the economic survey. The first key point is with regards to the GDP growth. Now the economic survey has upgraded the GDP growth, the estimates for the GDP growth. It has said that for the year 2018 to 19, GDP growth estimates are from 7 to 7.5% compared to the current 6.75%. So the GDP growth is expected to rise, and this is going to reinstate India as the world's fastest growing economy. So this is a positive outlook which the economic survey has quoted. Another thing is with regards to the reform measures is what the economic survey has analyzed. These reform measures have been like the GST, also steps for resolving the twin balance sheet problem. Now, in succinct, the twin balance sheet problem is the balance sheet problems which are faced by both the banks as well as the corporate sector. The corporate sector has taken loans from the banks, but it is unable to cover its losses, and it is unable to repay these loans back to the bank. So not only are the balance sheets of the corporate sector stressed, this is also resulting in stressed balance sheets for the bank. So that is one analysis, and in this regard the government has taken various steps. For example, the government has introduced the insolvency and bankruptcy code, which is to resolve the problem of the rising NPAs, and also the government is focusing on recapitalization of banks. Yesterday only we discussed that 2.11 lakh crore package has been decided for recapitalization. So these reform measures by the government is something that the economic survey has appreciated and acknowledged. So that is one thing that is important. Also, the economic survey has talked about some global trends where it has acknowledged that there is a global recovery which is happening, and this is something that is going to result in an increased demand, and this increased demand will impact the exports, and there is going to be a rise in exports, and this is something that will benefit the economy of India. So that is about the global trends. Also, the economic survey has cautioned against certain threats. Now these threats are first and foremost with regards to the rising oil prices, which we have discussed previously also, that the oil prices are rising, and these oil prices have two impacts. One, they are going to reduce the growth rate, and second, they are going to increase the inflation. So both these impacts are not in the health of the economy. So this is something that the economic survey has cautioned against. And another issue which the economic survey has raised is with regards to the stock prices. Now the economic survey has said that the stock prices in the country are rising, and they're rising unsustainably. This rise is something that the survey has cautioned against, and it has warned that there could be a sudden crash in the stock prices. Now with regards to the stock prices, you need to understand that often in these stock prices, foreign institutional investors are the major investors. So what happens is that this is hot money, and this money can immediately enter as well as leave the economy. So this leaves the economy very, very vulnerable. So any unprecedented flow of dollars in the economy is going to impact the credibility of the rupee. So those in those perspectives also, the economic survey has warned against the rising prices of stocks. So that is one analysis which has been given. Another thing is that an analysis of the fiscal front is what has been given. Here the economic survey has cautioned that already the country is facing a fiscal deficit, and thus there is a need for modest consolidation by the government, and the government needs to adopt a calibrated deficit reduction program. Now also a warning has been given that this is also a pre-election year, so there is a huge tendency that the government would focus on spending more and having more populist measures. So a check on that needs to be maintained to ensure the fiscal health of the country. So this is something that the economic survey has highlighted. Another very important aspect that the economic survey has dealt with is with regards to an analysis on agriculture. It has advocated for supporting agriculture because it has analyzed agriculture vis-a-vis the climate change, and it is said that the climate change is going to have immense adverse impact on agriculture. It has even given a figure that 20 to 25% of agricultural income is going to be reduced in unirrigated areas because of climate change. Now in all previous articles on agriculture, we have analyzed that how there is a huge amount of distress in agriculture, especially because of poor income. So if this income is further going to reduce in because of climate change, then indeed it is going to have very much catastrophic effects on the farmers. So this is something that has been analyzed with regards to agriculture. Another thing which has been analyzed is with regards to a cereal centric approach of the agriculture has been analyzed in the economic survey. So that is something that has been highlighted here. Again, the economic survey has focused on some newer areas, and it has called for the problems of job creation and employment and education. I'm sorry, one more problem, that is employment, education, are the two major problems which the economic survey has highlighted. So those are the basic problems, issues which the economic survey has highlighted. These are the salient features of the economic survey of 2018. However, economic survey as a document for UPSC is indispensable. You have to read the economic survey, though it is obviously beneficial if you finish the entire economic survey, and a reading of the economic survey is a benchmark to judge your preparation for economy part in the entire UPSC preparation. But for those who are lacking time and who do not have so much of time to invest in reading the entire economic survey, you can go in for some shorter versions of it, some summaries of economic survey which are provided by coaching institutes. But indeed, economic survey is the most important document for economics, so that has been released, and it warrants reading by all aspirants. So coming to the next article, a path to executive power. Now this is an article on the issue of office of profit in the backdrop of the disqualification of 20 members, 20 MLAs of the Aam Aadmi Party. Now this topic has been dealt with in very much detail in the discussion of the 22nd of January. So I would suggest that those of you who have not seen this video, please go and see this video, because this topic is of utmost relevance and I have discussed it in full detail there. Only two new issues is what is important in this particular editorial. The first is with regards to legislature versus the executive. Now, despite the fact that the three sectors, that is the legislature, executive and judiciary, have a separation between them, you need to understand that it is the legislature which is supreme to the executive. And why is it so? Because the executive is responsible to the legislature, and the legislature is supposed to maintain some checks on the executive. So this is how the structure was envisaged in the constitution initially, but this is something that is not happening now. Now there is a tendency that the legislature has been much weakened compared to the executive, and the executive is having immense powers. And as a result of this, there is a desire amongst the lawmakers that they wish to hold executive posts. So if they are unable to get an executive post of a minister, then they are adopting for some back channel ways, for example the case of parliamentary secretaries. So this analysis between executive and the legislature, and this distortion of the distribution of powers between the legislature and the executive, is an underlying analysis of this controversy of office of profit. So this is one thing that is important. Another thing that is important is with regards to the idea of feebled lawmakers. Now here you need to understand that trends like the whip and also purely executive drive of legislative agenda, another thing is anti-defection law, all these things have somehow weakened the lawmakers, and the lawmakers are at present feeling unempowered, and it is for this reason also that they are seeking executive posts. So these are some two new analysis that this editorial had to offer, and indeed these are very important analysis. Questions can ask that why is office of profit, why is it that the posts of parliamentary secretaries are rising? So this is the cause for rise in the number of parliamentary secretaries, and this is a phenomenon across various states. So that is something that you need to understand. Once again, please go and watch this video of 22nd of January, as the topic is of utmost importance for your UPSC mains. Now coming to the next topic, 3 milestones in education. The opinion is that there is enough data about the learning crisis in India. What is needed is effective decentralized action. Now, the context of this article is, first and foremost, there is a learning crisis in India. This is something that is being reflected by various reports and studies. Another thing is that the annual status of education report 2017, which is a report by the NGO Pratham, it is released annually. So this report has been released, and the figures of and the data of this report is the context for this editorial. Another thing is that a district report cards from the National Achievement Survey is what has been released. So this is district specific data which has been released. So it is in this context that this editorial has been written, and some important issues have been raised here. The first is that the author here says that this is the most ideal time to analyze the education sector of the country. Now, why does she say that this is the most ideal time? This is because, first and foremost, the RTE, the Right to Education Act, was introduced in the year 2010, and it was focusing on the age group 6 to 14 years, that is from 1st class to 8th class. And now this entire act has completed 8 years. So as per, because of its completion of 8 years, one complete batch of students have been produced who have taken the benefit of the RTE Act throughout their tenure, this throughout the tenure of for which this act was envisaged. So this first batch of students is now prepared, and these students can be studied upon, and it can be analyzed whether or not the RTE has had some positive impact. So that is one analysis. Another thing is that these two reports, the ACER and the NAS, have given some important data. So it is in this regard also that this is one of the most ideal times to analyze and decide upon policy framework for education. So that is one of the first issue. The second issue is with regards to the a comparison between the ACER and the NAS report. Now, you need to understand some differences between them. Now, the ACER has been released by an NGO, as I mentioned, the Pratham, whereas the NAS is a government-sponsored program. So that is the first difference. Another thing is that ACER is largely a household survey, whereas the NAS is a school-based survey. Also, ACER is a one-to-one approach. Here, students are interviewed directly, whereas the NAS is a pen-paper test. A test is conducted of the students to get some results. Another thing is that in the ACER, all children are included, whether they are in school or whether they are out of school, whether they are dropouts. So all these children are included, whereas in the NAS, only children in government schools are the ones who are focused upon. So that is one difference. Also, the ACER report is largely focusing on the foundational skills, for example, reading and arithmetic, whereas the NAS has a wider skill set which is analyzed. However, despite these differences, the similarities are that both reports are highly acknowledged, and also these are the two sources which are repeatedly available for analysis. So they are indeed very, very important data. So that is the analysis. Another issue is with regards to the district level data. As I told you, NAS is a district level report card, and also this time ACER has given a district level report. So it is for the first time that data at the district level is what has been given, and this is of much significance because the government's education system, the planning and the planning process of the government in the education system is largely based on district planning. So if that district specific data is available, then it will ensure better planning, it will ensure better allocation of funds, and it will ensure better implementation of the policy. So indeed this newer trend of district level data is something that is much welcome. Also, this is the core idea that this will ensure decentralized action in this regard, as previously the central government is making laws for the states, or even if the state is making laws for some districts, then this is somehow not ideal, because a one size fits all policy is not ideal for education. So a district specific policy is what was needed, and this data has now made that possible. So that is something that has been advocated in this editorial. Another thing that has been suggested is with regards to a learning improvement fund. Now here the author has suggested that it is prime time that even after 8 years of RTE, now it is prime time that the government should move beyond universal schooling towards learning for all, because indeed the RTE program has been successful in enrolling the students. That is one feat which the government has indeed achieved. But the issue is that despite that, the learning outcomes is something that is poor. So the focus now has to shift towards improving these learning outcomes, and in this respect, a learning improvement fund is what should be set up. Also, the author says here that for this learning improvement fund, the focus should be a multi-year period, because at present the funds for education are largely annual funds because they are allocated as part of the budget. But this strategy should shift, and the funds need to be allocated for a long-term period, because learning is not an annual process, it is a long-term process. So this is something that the government should advocate. So these are the major issues which have been analyzed in the editorial. The editorial indeed has given some newer ideas which you can use in your essays on education or any specific question. So that is the importance of the editorial. Coming to the next article, a pivot in Asia. Now, the context of this article is the National Defense Strategy and the National Security Strategy documents that have been released by the US. And as per these documents, it is revealed clearly that US is going to focus on Asia as a pivot. So that is the context of this editorial. Now, some issues that are relevant here are first and foremost with regards to the changing geopolitics. Now, indeed, the Asia Pacific region, especially this region of Asia, has some changing geopolitics. And what are these changing geopolitics? First is with regards to China. China is on a rise and China is an emerging global power. So definitely that is a major change in the geopolitics of this region. Also, the issue of North Korea and the entire Korean peninsula is what is important in this region. North Korea has become a nuclear power and it has had belligerence with the US. So from that perspective, also this region has become of utmost importance for the US. So that is one analysis. Another thing is that the importance of the Asian economies in international trade is something that has caused a new focus on this region, and it is in this regard also that the US is focusing more on this region. So that is the context of changing geopolitics of this region. Also, now coming to the partnerships by US. Now US is largely focusing on two types of partnerships. One is an economic partnership. Here US is focusing on this region because this is the economic powerhouse of the world now. Also, US has withdrawn from the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. So now US is seeking some major economic treaties and economic partnerships. So it is for that reason that US is focusing. Another aspect is strategic. As we all know that China is rising and US is wary of China's rise and it wants to check this rise of China. So US is partnering with four countries here, that is India, it is partnering with Australia, Japan to form a quad. So this is the strategic partnership of US. So that is one analysis. Another thing is with regards to the non-traditional threats in this region. For example, piracy is rising in this region. Terrorism is something that is rising from this region. There are severe crises of cyber security. The recent cybersecurity attacks by North Korea, all of this is making this region extremely vulnerable, and this is another cause for Asia being the pivot of US policy and also of the global policy. So that is one analysis. Another thing is with regards to China's influence. Now, China has a huge influence in this region. China has been favoring its infrastructure and dollar diplomacy in this region. The Belt and Road Initiative of China has almost touched all the countries in Asia. So that is one important analysis with regards to Chinese influence. And this influence of China is having ramifications even on India, because there is no neighbor of India which is untouched by this Chinese influence. So that is something that is important. Also, China has made huge dominance in the Indian Ocean region. So that is one analysis which has been given here. So China's influence and China's rise is having direct ramifications for India also, and thus India is a key partner for US in its policy of pivot to Asia. So that is the analysis here. Now the next analysis is with regards to countering China. Now this rise of China is something that is somehow sending fear signals in the entire region, and it is something that is a major cause of concern, which was also discussed in the ASEAN summit. So the only solution as per this editorial to this problem is that if all the countries in the region are united, and only if they are united will they ensure a countering to China's rise, and only in such a scenario can China be balanced. So that is the analysis that has been given. Now here the role of India is that to counter China and to ensure this unity in the region, India is the country which can act as the consensus builder and a net security provider to this region. So that is the importance of India, not only to this region but also to US in its policy for Pivot Asia. So that is the analysis of this editorial. The idea of Asia and Asian century and Pivot Asia is repetitive, and a question in this regard indeed can come in the in the UPSC mains paper. So that is the importance of this editorial. Now before we finish, some piece of information. We are starting a prelims batch which from the 5th of February 2018. It shall be a comprehensive program for the entire prelims required questions, and it will specifically be focusing on the prelims paper of 2018. So all interested candidates, please do get in touch with us. This is our address and these are our phone details. So with this we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching and I hope to see you tomorrow.